The joint work session of the City Commission and the Oregon City Natural Resources Committee. Today is Tuesday, November 10th, 2015 at 5:30 p.m. Ms. Reed, you want to do a roll call, please?
ORC Committee Member Douglas DeHart.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Craven is not here. Mr. Neely.
Here.
Mr. Boyce is not here. Mr. Herman is not here. Ms. Redlinger? Here. Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg is excused. Mayor Holliday?
Here. Well, it should take less time without Jerry here, huh?
I saw Jerry yesterday, and he had the high tide today is 5 p.m. and he has to move his boat and his dock. So, if it was 7, he might have made it, but he couldn't make a 5:30. He asked me to tell you that.
Richard Craven is ill, so he wasn't able to.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor, evening, commissioners. So we have the opportunity tonight to have a joint work session between the City Commission and the Natural Resources Committee to provide an update and just have a discussion about the work that they've been, what they've been working on, as well as opportunities that exist for communication between the Commission and the committee, which serves an important role for the community. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pete Walter. He prepared the staff report, and then we can begin working through the update and the discussion for tonight.
Thanks. I won't spend a lot of time going through my staff report. I basically outlined some of the accomplishments that the Natural Resources Committee has made and contributed to the city over the last 2 years. Examples were the helped amend the street tree list for the city. They've been invaluable in reviewing natural resource overlay district applications. They've worked hard on the Heritage Tree Code and have provided recommendations on Heritage Tree nominations and Heritage Grove nominations as well. Those are just a few of the accomplishments. We've got a great dialogue going now between the departments and the NRC, and it's something that we want to see continue. And with that, I'm going to let Ginger Redlinger, our chair, take over and express what's in the letter before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Chair, Commissioners, and fellow members. We met to come up with 3 questions that we wanted to discuss with you today, feeling that we're kind of using the metaphor, we're on a roll, and we've found that groove of where we can be very helpful, and we want to see where we can take this next step. So I don't want to spend much time talking about that other than can we discuss these questions. So question number 1 is what is the best way to continue to ensure open dialogue between the Natural Resources Committee and the City Commission and other city departments and groups? So we'd like to discuss that a little bit, maybe get some feedback from you to guide our work.
Do you want to go through the other 2 questions and then circle back?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
The second question, some of them overlap a little bit. How should the recommendations made by the Natural Resources Committee be processed and acted upon by city managers and committees? I feel like it's a loop we need to close. And then the third is, what is the best way to continue to enhance inter or intra communications between the Natural Resources Committee and the City Commission and other city departments and groups? So, please, Mr.
So what's the history? How have you been doing this in the past, Ginger? And what's been the communication before this? What was the response before this? So.
Well, I'll start by saying we usually start with our staff, city staff, and he brings issues to us. And from there, we respond to those issues depending on which department they come from or where they reside. We engage in dialogue about it. We try to make recommendations if recommendations are solicited. And sometimes we provide feedback of things that have been brought to our attention and pass them on to the staff who sends them to the place where they need to be. Sometimes there's a lag time for that information to come back because the city has multiple priorities. And sometimes we're just not sure where they're supposed to land. So would anyone like to add into that historical information?
Just one thing I might add here that maybe helps, because I'm sure you're struggling a little bit with, okay, if those are some of the issues, what are some of the ideas to address them? And you see in front of you, too, a set of revised bylaws that the committee prepared that includes some of our suggestions that do address, not completely, but partially, I think, each of these three issues. So that, at least in my view, that's one of the things that's sort of in front of you here, since revisions to the bylaws, of course, would be, your authority.
So I guess that's what I was going to rephrase that, but how have you been working with the city commission before this? I guess that was the question, so. Or has there been, maybe?
There hasn't been.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, there we go. So have you got suggestions on how you'd like to do that?
Some of our suggestions are contained within our revised bylaws, so if you wouldn't mind taking a look at those.
Okay.
I should add that the process of the committee revising the bylaws was done through a several-month process, using some outside facilitation help, and the intent was to simplify the scope of activities in line with the city commission goals and priorities.
So it sounded like some of the things that came up, you would talk to different staff people, but in your bylaws, revised bylaws, it says the chair shall have, they shall communicate with a staff liaison. So is that, are you thinking of one person instead of multiple people like you have been doing? Is that what your thoughts are? Maybe to have one connection?
Well, part of that conversation we thought we could have today is which is the right department and who is the right person, in order for that information to be disseminated and useful to whoever would best use it, because not all information goes in one spot and is useful at that spot. You've had some thoughts about that.
Well, first of all, I think working with the Planning Commission makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's historically there were issues, and the Natural Resource Committee existed once and then went away and had come back. But I think under the current leadership of the Planning Commission, and also Pete Walters, but under the current director of the Planning Commission, things have worked out far better. I think the Planning Commission, working with the Planning Department, community development, but I've got the old terminology, forgive me, works well. Natural resource issues, of course, go across many department lines, public works and parks in particular. And we've had representation of staff from those two departments making presentations to us. So I think things work far more smoothly than they did, I think, in previous times, and I think there's been general agreement on that. If there are maybe even some ways to facilitate maybe occasional joint meetings or something with the Parks and Recreation Committee. There are lands that they have that are really open space natural areas, and that is I think there's that primary purpose. There's no clear advisory committee with Public Works, because their Transportation Advisory Committee is the only ones that work with them, and but there are stormwater detention facilities and so forth, and as I say, they've come and spoken to us, but it'd be nice if perhaps there would be some way of working, I think, with other appropriate advisory committees where it's possible.
Well, and it does say that under the your activity planning sheet, number 5, it says schedule a joint meeting with PRAC to develop working relationship, and There's another one that I saw in there too.
I think part of the,
Planning Commission.
I'll refer to it as a concern, I guess, but this has been before the commission for some time, maybe even before this commission met. And I don't think this commission has acted upon it. I think one of the things that we wanted to do was perhaps hasten that process, and I think that's one of the reasons we asked for this session here to get this before you and see if we could it'd be nice if we could act it on before the beginning of the year, but if not, soon after the beginning of the next commission, the next meeting year.
So I did have one thought. You were talking about communication. Before we do our goal session planning, our goal planning session, it might be helpful for us to know a little bit about what your goals are and what you're thinking, just to have that knowledge.
Probably fair to say, isn't it, that that's something the committee has talked about too specifically? I mean, the two ideas we've had about how we, was the best way for us to communicate with the commission. One of them is an annual report to you where our chair and whomever else would appear before you once a year with a, report on accomplishments for that year and key issues for the next year or something like that, and have a dialogue. And then secondly, exactly the point you just made, that when the commission goes through their goal setting process, that, we would forward some ideas that could be just put in the hopper for consideration with those you get from others.
Last year, when we considered our work plan, we looked at what the city's goals were and tried to find our place, how we could support the city with the goals. Would you like us to express the work that we want to do as a goal statement for you to consider in your development of your goals, or would you like us to actually state a goal? We can make it broader.
I think your activity planning sheet is good and very clear, and it does express which goal it's working towards.
Okay. Keep it in that format then.
But I think if you wanted to, if you had some different idea beyond this, we have an interim goal setting session work weekend coming up in January. If you wanted to send something along with staff then, we would certainly consider it.
Or something you consider a priority too.
Okay.
Because obviously the goals are full, but it's important for us to know what you think is really a priority.
Okay.
Well, we do appreciate all the work you folks are doing. It's not like we don't know you're there. So, but we know that it seems like you work more with the other committees, planning and parks and stuff like that, and then, but we would always like to have an update, an annual update, because that's what TAC or PRAC and TAC and the other committees do. It kind of give us an annual update of what's happened and what the future holds, and you're always welcome to do that.
Commissioner Smith?
So I'm just part of what has already been addressed, but we have all the different committees under the city that we encourage, obviously, to report every year. We don't necessarily have a process for those committees bringing things to us, right prior to the goals session usually. It's a little different when we have a 2-year, the annual reports help us understand where we're at, but I think prior to our full 2-year budget cycle, it'd be nice to have the staff touch base with the individual committees that are under those departments or connected with those departments, just to say what's on the agenda and have a report to some degree at our goals session about updates for committees themselves.
So you're
a
talking
small
about
one,
prior
but
to
also-
January 2017?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then continuing on, that there's a way for the commission to start that budget process and goals session with an idea of what else is out there from those committees, whether that's the committee is making a report to staff prior to that, or the staff asking for some sort of list.
I believe,
I think that would be
Scott,
good.
maybe, I think I'm correct.
In some ways that's done. Yeah.
I was going to say, I believe the Parks and Recreation Committee
Yeah.
did that last year before the goal setting that you all did. And there's a little bit of a disjointness there, but I don't think it's important. But you oftentimes, as we did, have new commission members coming in after
Right,
we made that
right.
presentation. But the point is, it is presented, it is before you when the goal setting session is set forward. And there have been a couple things that we've talked about that we would not have made a presentation to you until before your 2-year planning project, because it probably had some budget implications, and you've got a biannual budget, and I imagine it can be tweaked, but from that standpoint, it does make sense to do something like that. But in the interim, if there's, I think it'd be worthwhile for us to come forward with something before you at your revisitation of your goals.
So as I understand it, this retreat in January is not to revisit the goals so much as to see where we are.
Right.
It's a status update from staff and on our ability to accomplish goals and give you an update on
All right.
where we're at. I think I would like to acknowledge the work that the NRC members went into, because for those who may remember, the original code was very broad, and I think that there was an acknowledgement that we should try to focus this down into something a little bit more defined and manageable. So, I think what the NRC members are probably looking for is some confirmation of their work plan, and I hope that over the next year, as we prepare for the next biennium budgeting that will occur at roughly this time next year, are there defined projects? Are there more specifics that the commission can give to assist, the Natural Resource Committee in that back and forth of information? Because I think that, we've been trying to mold this program that's a little undefined, and it's not funded. And so, I think trying to get ahead of that a little bit more when we go into the next biennium budgeting process on both from staff, with the information that we can provide, NRC with the projects that they've worked on, seen what's worked, what hasn't worked over the last year, and then just the commission thinking about, is there a more defined role? Is there more direction that can be provided to the NRC that would assist them in making up their work plan? So I guess that's kind of the ask that I have over the next year as we work through this, is really to try to figure out how do we want this to work. We've set it up, which is great. We've got great volunteers dedicated to the program. It's just, how do we define what we want from this? Is it education? Is it finding grants to do projects? Is it Tree City? I mean, there are a lot of opportunities out there. And right now we're trying to do multiple things to kind of see where do we fit. And so I think that's part of this learning process as well. And I think the part that I've struggled with is, it's in planning, but there may be requests for, something that has to do with parks that may go through PRAC, or a piece of property that's owned by Public Works. So there's just this coordinate. It's trying to find the right spot to fit, and I'm not saying that CD is not the spot. I think it's just giving it that. Defining what the role is and how it interacts when we have other departments that have advisory committees overlooking some of their lines or their processes. So, like I said, this isn't looking for an answer tonight. I think it's just thinking about, how do we utilize, these multiple hours of volunteers that we have to the benefit of the city as well as to what they're interested in.
I know that early on, when I was from being on the commission, that the NRC, a lot of the dialogue was around the cove and things associated with that. So when the scope was narrowed, that piece kind of come out of it. And I'm asking that just because our last, where do the issues with the cove fit in terms of staff or the NRC, because of questions like dredging that came up again at our Urban Renewal Commission meeting with the Cove Project, and also with the stagnant water of the algae bloom and things like that. Is that still some, and the erosion that I remember, the erosion that was a concern on the peninsula there. Are those underneath? How are those being addressed?
Under Article 4 of their revised
Well, it wasn't on the rec
bylaws,
plan, right? So that's still there. But
it says, receive notice of and comment on land use application and city activities that have potential to impact natural resources in the city and its urban growth boundary. So that would cover that, right?
Okay.
So environmental concerns, is that what you're thinking, Rocky, in particular?
Well,
I just wanted to kind of get more of. It's I guess it's a separate topic, honestly, but where the I don't have an answer really to where we're at in that process of talking about dredging, I don't know. People in the community ask me occasionally about that. I don't really know where the city's at on that in terms of the process of discussing that or even dealing with it. So I just don't know if that's at a staff level now, or if it's still, I don't know.
I think that's been one of the things we've been trying to work through, is that,
Okay.
It's difficult because, you want input, but you have a code when
Right.
it comes to land use applications. So I think there's been some education and discussions going on. What role does the Natural Resource Committee play when it's a type 2 land use decision? It's a staff decision, and it's pretty prescribed,
Right.
Versus more of a comprehensive plan, or a concept plan, and the involvement there of making sure that we touch base with them. I think that there are opportunities here for them. Let's say it was to look at dredging or habitat, but I think the part where I lacked was that I didn't account for funds to actually in the budget to do some of the work that is beyond the scope of what staff can do.
Right.
So I kind of run into this, we'd love to do this, and I don't have money to go hire a consultant to do the work.
But that's where the goals session comes in, and that
Right.
yeah.
Right, and I think that's where it would help, because I think there are a lot of good ideas that come forward, but I have no fund to
Right.
do any of that.
I might mention, we get the land use applications for, that go before the planning commission. We are receiving those now.
Yes. Kind of bring this back to the committee at least. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, and we've discussed it with Tony, and I don't think there's any doubt that the committee's able to and willing to, play an advisory role on just the issues that you brought up. I mean, the real challenge is determining when they're ripe and what the question is you want to pose to us. And then, after all, we aren't, running out there like a little band of vigilantes or something. We're basically waiting for the phone to ring, more like the Maytag repairman,
Maybe we should.
Well, sometimes we want to initiate the phone calls ourselves, though.
well, and if you're getting the land use applications, I assume prior to the planning commission or at the same time as the planning commission?
Yeah, before the planning commission looks at it. Yeah.
Right, so then you guys have the opportunity to comment at the planning commission level.
Yeah. That's right.
Perfect.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else the committee members wanted to?
We'll circle back to the bylaws one last time. I mean, that they've been sitting out there without action on them for a year and a half now. I mean, they are our thinking on this. We've shared them with Tony and Pete. Tony helped us revise them, all that sort of thing. But, I mean, we're hoping that the next step is to either to adopt them or give us feedback on further revisions. If that's your druthers.
Mr. Conkle, are you comfortable with the bylaws as they are now?
Yeah, I think there's been quite a bit of work that went into trying to narrow down the scope.
Okay.
Of what responsibilities
So
the NRC
why don't we, if everybody's comfortable on the commission, why don't we
Okay.
bring this back onto the consent agenda for,
Next meeting.
not, yeah, we could do it the next meeting, because the next meeting's a week from tomorrow. Right?
Correct.
So why don't we just toss this on the consent agenda for that meeting?
Okay.
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then we will adjourn this meeting. We'll come back into session at 6 o'clock for the regular work session of the City Commission.